She walked in, and every hidden lie came to light. Before you judge a person by their clothes, their age, or their silence, remember, power changes hands in seconds. Watch closely, because this story is a reminder that dignity costs nothing, but arrogance can cost everything. Stay with this till the end. The sun had only begun its slow climb over the skyline of Sterling City when Union Crest Bank's flagship branch unlocked its heavily reinforced glass doors. The building itself was a symbol of power, its towering pillars, polished marble floors, gold-trimmed railings, and the quiet echo of footsteps all reminded anyone who entered that money ruled here. Everything about it was curated to impress the rich and intimidate the ordinary. Employees rushed in through the staff entrance, adjusting ties, smoothing skirts, whispering about deadlines, targets, and the fact that their CEO was coming in early that morning. Everyone moved with urgency, because at Union Crest, fear was disguised as professionalism, and anxiety was labeled discipline. The woman they were afraid of was Clara Whitmore. By 8:02 a.m., Clara stepped out of her car, a sleek, charcoal-black sedan with privacy glass, and walked toward the main entrance. Her heels clicked like a metronome, sharp, precise, unforgiving. Clara always walked like someone who believed the world needed to move out of her way or risk being crushed. At 39, she had built a reputation few dared challenge. The media called her the ICE executive. Her colleagues called her the enforcer. She called herself effective. Clara was the youngest CEO Union Crest had ever appointed. She believed her success came from her ability to read people instantly. A suit and a luxury watch meant valuable. An old jacket and worn shoes meant risk. She believed it, repeated it, trained others with it, and enforced it ruthlessly. So that morning, when she stepped into the lobby and saw an elderly black man quietly standing at the reception desk, holding a small notebook and a folded ID card, her judgment was immediate and absolute. Clara's eyes narrowed. His clothes were weathered. His shoes looked like they'd walked through too many seasons. His hat was old-fashioned. He didn't look like he belonged in a place where millionaires came to negotiate, where wealthy clients secured deals, and where corporate investors gathered for private banking services. To Clara, he was clearly in the wrong place. But Harold Jenkins didn't look nervous or confused. If anything, he seemed completely at ease, like someone who had walked through those doors many times before. With a small, polite smile, he approached the teller. "Good morning, young lady," he said, his voice steady and warm. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000 from my account." The teller blinked, unsure if she heard correctly. $50,000 was not a rare request at Union Crest, but it was unusual for someone who didn't come in with a documented appointment or a personal banker escort. Sir," she began cautiously, "may I see your—" Before she could finish, Clara's heels cut across the marble floor like a blade, and she stood directly behind the teller, her presence casting a shadow of authority that made everyone stiffen. "What seems to be the issue?" Clara asked coolly. The teller swallowed. "He wants to withdraw $50,000. Clara didn't let her finish. She turned her full attention to Harold. Her eyes swept over him, head to toe, dismissive, unimpressed, calculating. "Sir," she said sharply, "this is a private banking branch. Are you sure you are in the right location?" Her tone was not a question. It was an accusation. Harold remained calm. "Yes, I've been a client here for more than 20 years. Clara crossed her arms, skeptical. The lobby grew quiet. Even the customers waiting in line paused, sensing tension. 20 years, she repeated, as though the idea was an insult to her intelligence. "Do you have an appointment?" Harold smiled gently. "I wasn't aware I needed one to withdraw my own money." Clara didn't smile back. She stepped closer, close enough that Harold could see the gold cufflinks shaped like the Union Crest logo. Everything about her screamed power, and an absolute belief that she was right. "We've had a series of fraud attempts lately," Clara said, her voice carrying across the lobby. "Large withdrawals require verification. You don't look like someone who handles private banking. Perhaps you should visit a local branch more suited to your needs." The implication landed hard. Several people looked away, embarrassed for him. Others watched with judgmental curiosity. Harold's polite expression faltered. He looked down at his notebook, then back up at Clara. "I assure you, my documents are in order. If you need more proof, I have additional paperwork in my car. I can bring them to you." Clara nodded once, but it wasn't a gesture of agreement, it was something closer to dismissal. "Yes, do that," she said curtly. "But I must warn you, if your paperwork isn't legitimate, we will involve law enforcement." A soft gasp rippled through the lobby. Harold blinked slowly, absorbing her words. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want access to my account." Clara didn't answer. She simply turned away, signaling the conversation was beneath her. Humiliated but still composed, Harold nodded to the teller and quietly walked out of the building. The moment he stepped outside, the whispers began. What was he even thinking? 50,000. In that jacket. She was right. People like that always try something. But one person, an older staff member with decades of history at the bank, watched Harold leave with a look of sorrow. She recognized him. She knew exactly who he was. Clara didn't notice. Or care. 5 minutes later, Harold returned through the glass doors, holding a small leather folder with the documents Clara had requested. But waiting for him were 2 uniformed security guards and Clara herself. The guards stood with folded arms, blocking his path. "Sir," Clara said coldly, "we will have to ask you to leave. Your behavior is suspicious, and we do not process large withdrawals for walk-in clients without prior verification. You are disrupting operations." Harold's eyes dimmed. Not with anger, but with disappointment so deep it shook even a few employees watching behind their desks. "You are making a mistake," he said quietly. Clara's chin tilted upward. The only mistake would be allowing potential fraud to go unchecked. "Leave the premises. Now?" The guard stepped forward, guiding him toward the door. He didn't resist. He simply looked around the grand lobby one last time, at the walls he had helped build indirectly, at the institution that once welcomed him with respect. Then he left. No one followed him. No one apologized. And Clara, standing tall with her hands clasped confidently behind her back, addressed her staff. "That is how you protect the bank." Her employees nodded outwardly. Inwardly, many were shaken. She returned to her office feeling victorious, another potential threat handled, another example set. But the truth was very different. Clara had just humiliated one of the bank's oldest clients. A man who had contributed more to Union Crest's legacy than she had ever bothered to learn. A man whose next phone call would cost her everything she believed she was entitled to. Because the elderly black man she kicked out of the building wasn't a threat. He was the one holding the $3 billion deal she desperately needed. And by the time the sun began to set that very same day, he would become the reason Clara Whitmore's empire collapsed. The atmosphere inside Union Crest Bank shifted almost immediately after Harold Jenkins stepped out the door. It was subtle at first, small glances exchanged between tellers, whispers in corners, long sighs from employees who felt the weight of Clara's decision even if she didn't. Clara herself walked back to her office with the confidence of someone who believed she had made a flawless judgment call. She never looked back. She didn't care to see the discomfort she left behind. To her, leadership meant asserting dominance, enforcing rules, and proving she was the smartest person in any room. At 9:15 a.m., she closed her office door and began reviewing her schedule. The biggest event of her day, the biggest event of her year, was the signing meeting with Global Equity Partners, a deal worth $3 billion. Union Crest had been negotiating it for 5 years, through multiple CEOs, legislative changes, and countless revisions to the investment structure. This deal was more than money. It would cement Clara as one of the most powerful financial executives in the country. It would put Union Crest on the global map. It would secure her contract renewal with a substantial bonus. Everything, her reputation, her legacy, her pride, rested on what would happen at 1 p.m. She rehearsed her talking points with precision. Our risk management structure is unmatched. We serve high-net-worth clients with top-tier professionalism. We identify and neutralize threats before they escalate. To Clara, those were the pillars of her success. But while she practiced her speech, something else was unfolding in the bank, something she was completely blind to. At the teller counter, the young woman who had assisted Harold tried to hide her distress. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed. She kept replaying the moments, his soft voice, his patience, the quiet embarrassment in his eyes after being doubted, interrogated, and finally expelled. She whispered to the senior teller beside her, "I think we made a mistake. I think he really was a long-term client." The senior teller, Ms. Roten, who had worked at the bank for 29 years, closed her eyes with a heavy sigh. Her voice was low, pained. He wasn't just a client. He was someone important. I recognized him the moment he walked in. The younger teller frowned. "But why didn't you say something?" "I tried," the older woman whispered. "But once Clara steps in, no one interrupts. You know that." The young teller swallowed. She did know. Everyone knew. Clara didn't listen. Clara dictated. Across the lobby, in the corporate wing, rumors were spreading. Staff who had been present were quietly telling others. She accused him of fraud. She kicked him out with guards. The poor man said he'd been here for 20 years. In the operations office, a compliance officer brought up the account logs to verify Harold Jenkins' history. When she typed in his name, the screen populated instantly. Client ID, HJ0003. Account type, Legacy Private Trust. Account status, active. Years with Union Crest, 21. Withdrawals over 50K, multiple. Risk level, green. Priority, high. The compliance officer went pale. She scrolled deeper through the records, each detail weighing heavier. He had deposited millions over the years. He had maintained long-term bonds through the bank. His investments predated Clara's entire career at Union Crest. She immediately sent an internal alert to Clara. Clara ignored it. She always ignored anything she believed could distract her before a major meeting. Meanwhile, outside the bank, Harold sat in his car with the leather folder still in his lap. He placed it gently beside him, exhaled, and reached for his phone. His hands didn't shake. His breathing remained calm. Harold Jenkins was not a man who acted out of anger. He had seen enough of life to know the cost of reacting emotionally. Instead, he operated with clarity, discipline, and a moral compass many had forgotten. He dialed a number from memory. A male voice answered. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins. Are we still on schedule for the signing with Union Crest at 1? Harold stared at the towering silver building through his windshield. "No," he said softly. "Cancel it." Silence. "Cancel the signing," the voice repeated, stunned. "Yes," Harold said. "Effective immediately." "Mr. Jenkins, that is a $3 billion contract. We have legal teams flying in, media outlets ready to publish." "Not with them," Harold replied. "We'll take our business elsewhere." But may I ask? Harold spoke calmly, but with a firmness that ended all debate. Find me a bank that values people, not appearances. The man on the other end exhaled. Understood, sir. I will inform all parties now. The call ended. Harold placed the phone in his cup holder, leaned back, and closed his eyes. The morning's humiliation still lingered, not because he had been questioned, but because he had been dismissed without dignity. He was not angry. He was disappointed. And in Harold's world, disappointment carried consequences. Inside Union Crest, just before noon, Clara sat in a conference room with her executive team, reviewing final preparations. For once, everyone in the room was quieter than usual, exchanging glances behind her back. The COO cleared his throat softly. Clara, may I ask, did something happen downstairs this morning? The staff seems unsettled. Clara didn't look up from her documents. I handled a potential fraud attempt. The CFO raised an eyebrow. Was it serious? It was an elderly walk-in trying to withdraw $50,000 with questionable documentation. I dealt with it accordingly. The executives exchanged another round of uneasy looks. The COO coughed. Was his name Harold Jenkins? Clara froze for half a second, just one. But she covered it with a practiced, sharp exhale. Yes. Why? The CFO's face blanched. Clara. Harold Jenkins is the principal trustee of the Global Equity Partners deal. Clara's pen slipped from her fingers. What? But before anyone could explain further, the conference phone buzzed. The IT director pressed a button. It's Global Equity Partners. Clara straightened immediately. Put it through. A voice came over the speaker, calm, professional, distant. Good afternoon. This is to inform Union Crest Bank that the Jenkins Family Investment Trust has officially terminated all negotiations and will not proceed with the $3 billion partnership. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The chairman, sitting at the far end of the table, leaned forward. May we ask why? There is no further discussion, the voice continued. Mr. Jenkins has issued a final directive. The deal is cancelled. Clara felt the walls closing in. She felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears. This must be a misunderstanding, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. We can schedule a call. The line clicked. The call was ended. The deal was gone. The room was silent. Clara stood still, unable to move, unable to breathe. Her chairman turned toward her slowly. His voice was controlled, but the rage beneath it was unmistakable. Clara, he said, what did you do? And suddenly, everything she had ignored that morning, the compliance alert, the unease in her staff, the humiliation in Harold's eyes, came crashing down on her. For the first time in years, Clara Whitmore had no answer. Upstairs, panic spread silently. Emails began circulating urgently. The legal team locked themselves in a meeting room. The communications department started drafting statements in case the news broke publicly. Downstairs, the staff felt a strange, mixing sense of anxiety and validation. They knew something serious had happened, but they also knew Clara's arrogance had finally hit a wall. And outside, in the parking lot, Harold Jenkins sat quietly, watching people rush out of the building in suits and skirts, phones pressed to their ears. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. He simply whispered. Respect is free. Disrespect. Disrespect is expensive. He started the engine. And drove away. For the first time in Clara Whitmore's career, the conference room felt like a courtroom, and she was the one on trial. The executives around the glossy table stared at her, as though she were a burning fuse attached to a stick of dynamite. No one spoke. No one dared inhale too loudly. The air was tight with shock, humiliation, and the dawning realization that they had just lost the single biggest deal in Union Crest's history. And the cause of their downfall was sitting at the head of the table, clutching the edge of the desk, as if the polished wood could stop her world from collapsing. Clara swallowed hard. This can't be final. They can't just cancel. The paperwork was nearly complete. The chairman, Mr. Donovan, was a seasoned banker with decades of experience. He had weathered recessions, political upheavals, stock crashes, and internal scandals, but he had never lost a $3 billion partnership in under 10 seconds. He closed the file in front of him slowly. They cancelled because of you. Clara opened her mouth, but he lifted a hand, a small gesture that carried more authority than her entire title ever had. Tell us exactly what happened with Mr. Jenkins this morning. Her throat tightened. She had led hundreds of boardroom discussions with perfect composure, but now her own voice felt foreign. There was a walk-in asking to withdraw $50,000, she began, forcing confidence she no longer felt. He had no appointment, no prior notice, and his appearance was inconsistent with our high-net-worth clients. The CFO flinched. Someone else muttered under their breath. Clara continued anyway. I followed protocol. I requested documentation. When he couldn't provide immediate verification, You expelled him with security, the COO said sharply, his patience evaporating. In front of customers. In front of staff. Without checking his file. Clara's face flushed. I acted in the interest of the bank. Fraud. Fraud, the chairman snapped. You accused Harold Jenkins, a client who has been with us since before you entered this industry, of fraud. She swallowed. I didn't know who he was. That's the problem, the chairman shot back. A CEO who doesn't know who her legacy clients are. A CEO who judges by appearance instead of records. The silence returned, sharp and suffocating. Clara stared at the polished table, her reflection distorted by the sheen. She was used to respect. Fear. Control. But now, she felt small, smaller than she had ever allowed herself to feel. Can we do damage control? The CFO asked weakly. Reach out, apologize, offer revised terms. The chairman shook his head. I spoke to their legal representative an hour ago. The directive is final. Mr. Jenkins refuses all communication. But why? Clara whispered, though she already knew the answer. Why? Mr. Donovan repeated. Because he came here expecting respect. And instead, he was treated like a criminal on the very ground he helped fund. Clara jerked her head up. He helped fund, what? The COO exhaled heavily. The Jenkins Family Trust contributed to the capital investment that built the private banking wing. His late wife was a major shareholder. His family was part of the foundation of this institution. The truth hit Clara like an avalanche. She had humiliated a man whose legacy was woven into the walls she guarded with pride. A man whose money, whose trust, had helped build the very marble floors she strutted across every morning. Her face drained of color. The chairman stood. Everyone else followed suit. The meeting was over, but the consequences were just beginning. As the executives filed out, Clara remained frozen in her chair, staring at nothing, replaying every detail of the morning. His soft voice. His polite smile. His quiet disappointment. She had dismissed him. She had judged him. She had humiliated him. And now her empire was cracking. Downstairs, the staff felt the tremors of the collapse long before official memos arrived. Phones rang non-stop. Emails poured in. Departments scrambled. The young teller, who had assisted Harold, wiped tears discreetly as she worked. She kept hearing his voice in her mind, I'll be right back with my documents. She whispered to herself, I should have spoken up. Ms. Roten, the senior teller, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. The responsibility is not yours. You tried. We all knew who he was. She paused. And she should have listened. The staff members exchanged looks loaded with meaning. They had endured Clara's harsh treatment for years, the cold remarks, the intimidation, the impossible standards, the fear-driven policies. But today felt different. Today, justice had a name. Harold Jenkins. By 2:30 p.m., word of the cancelled deal reached the national office. By 3 p.m., journalists caught wind of major corporate upheaval at Union Crest. By 3:45 p.m., anonymous insiders leaked that the deal fell through due to a grave leadership error at an executive level. The bank's stock dipped. Investors panicked. Directors demanded emergency meetings. And Clara, for the first time in her career, locked her office door, not to project authority, but to hide. She stood staring out the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the city below, cars moving, people laughing, life continuing as though her entire world wasn't crumbling. She replayed Harold's final words. You are making a mistake. She tried to convince herself she wasn't at fault. She tried to blame the teller for hesitating, the staff for not speaking up, the compliance officer for sending the alert too late, the security guards for escalating. But no matter how many times she tried to redirect the blame, everything circled back to her. She had looked at him and made a judgment, not based on data, not based on records, but based on assumptions. And now her assumptions were costing the bank billions. Her phone buzzed. She flinched. A message from the chairman. Board meeting at 5 p.m. Mandatory. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't naive, she knew what emergency board meetings meant. Her position was on the line. Her future depended on a room full of people who currently despised her. Her empire, built on cold confidence and rigid hierarchy, was trembling. And yet, somewhere in her mind, a stubborn voice whispered, I did what any CEO would do. But another, deeper voice, the one she ignored all her life, responded, No. You did what you always do. Across the city, in a modest brick house with a small garden of marigolds and rosemary, Harold Jenkins sat in his living room, sipping tea. The television played quietly in the background, but he wasn't watching it. He was thinking. Not about money. Not about deals. Not about Clara. He thought about dignity. He remembered his late wife, Teresa, who had always told him, never let anyone make you feel small, not for your age, your skin, or your clothes. He remembered the first time they opened their trust account at Union Crest, back when the bank was humble, respectful, and built on relationships rather than aesthetics. He remembered every friendly teller, every handshake, every moment of courtesy. Today had been different. Today had shown him that the bank he had supported for decades no longer existed. As he took another sip, his phone buzzed. A message from his investment advisor. Just to confirm, all negotiations with Union Crest officially terminated. Moving to Solara Bank next week. Harold replied. Proceed. Thank you. Then he set the phone aside. He wasn't angry. He wasn't vengeful. He simply believed people should be treated with respect. And disrespect, especially public, humiliating disrespect, came with a cost. A cost Clara Whitmore had just begun to pay. Back at Union Crest, the panic reached upper management. Departments were instructed to freeze all major decisions. Crisis teams were assembled. Lawyers drafted internal reports. And everywhere Clara walked, she felt eyes on her, cold, piercing, accusing. She returned to her office, trying to gather herself, but her hands shook slightly as she sat at her desk. She reached for a glass of water. Her reflection in the window caught her eye. For the first time, the mirror of glass didn't show a powerful CEO. It showed a woman who had built a throne out of fear, and was now drowning in the consequences. She whispered to herself, "This can't be happening." But it was. And the worst part? The real consequences hadn't even begun. The boardroom of Union Crest Bank had never felt this tense. The oval mahogany table normally gleamed with status and confidence, but today, the atmosphere was thick with apprehension. Executives whispered in low voices, glancing between the door and the messages lighting up their tablets. None of them said it aloud, but every single person in that room feared the same thing. Clara Whitmore had lost control. At exactly 4:02 p.m., the double doors opened sharply. Clara walked in with her signature brisk stride, her heels clicking like a countdown clock. Her hair was pulled back in a perfect twist, her suit immaculate, her expression stone-cold. Anyone seeing her for the first time would assume she was still in command. But her eyes exposed her. Behind the steel, something was cracking. "Good afternoon," she said, placing her leather folder on the table. "Let's get this over with." The CFO cleared his throat nervously. "Clara, the situation has escalated." "What situation?" she snapped. "A clerical misunderstanding. A rude customer. The board needs perspective, not panic." The silence that followed was heavy. Vice President Lydia Monroe locked her hands together. "It's not just a rude customer. Hartford and Lane is demanding a full report of misconduct. They are requesting an emergency compliance review." Clara waved dismissively. "Let them. I did my job. I protected the bank." "You humiliated the wrong man," Lydia replied quietly. "And the consequences are growing." Clara narrowed her eyes. He was suspicious. He was evasive. He refused to produce sufficient documentation. "And now," Lydia said, sliding a tablet forward, "your interaction with him is circulating online." Clara stopped breathing for a second. "What do you mean, online?" The CFO turned the screen toward her. A video began to play, the security footage from the lobby. Someone had leaked it. Every second of Clara belittling Mr. Jenkins was captured clearly, her cold tone, her dismissive gestures, her smirk, the security guards approaching him. Then, the clip cut to a post by an international business journalist. "Breaking. Elderly philanthropist Harold Jenkins turned away by Union Crest CEO Clara Whitmore hours before pulling $3 billion deal with Hartford and Lane. Sources call his treatment appalling and unacceptable." The clip had over 11 million views. Clara felt her throat tighten. "Who authorized this release?" "No one," the CFO replied. "It was leaked. Probably from someone inside the bank." Clara slammed her palm on the table. "Then find them. This is defamation. That footage is taken out of context." "You gave them the context," Lydia said flatly. "Your own words did." A murmur of agreement swept through the executives. Clara's jaw clenched, betrayal stung sharper than fear. "I want legal involved," she said. "This bank does not bow to a smear campaign." But the CFO wasn't finished. "That's not all." The lights dimmed automatically as he connected his laptop to the screen. A series of headlines filled the wall. Union Crest faces public outrage over racial profiling incident. Major investors freeze talks with CEO amid scandal. Employees call for leadership reform after viral footage. Clara's hands curled at her sides. "This is absurd," she said. "This is a manufactured narrative. I will hold a press conference. I will explain myself." Lydia shook her head. "It's too late for that. This isn't about a single incident anymore. This is about culture. Leadership. Ethics. Compliance. Brand trust. The investors want accountability. And they want it now, the CFO concluded. Clara stared at all of them, eyes wide with disbelief. You're turning on me. After everything I've done for this bank. We are trying to save the institution, Lydia replied. Right now, Clara, you are the threat. The room went silent. For the first time in years, Clara felt something she had forgotten, panic. While the board tore itself apart upstairs, the man at the center of the storm was miles away. Mr. Harold Jenkins sat on a balcony overlooking the quiet, golden sunset. Wearing a soft cardigan and sipping tea, he looked nothing like a billionaire financier. That was exactly how he preferred it. Across from him sat his longtime business partner, Vincent Hale, sharp, calm, and known for his ruthless intelligence. They'll reach out to you soon, Vincent said. They can't survive this without your statement. Harold nodded. I know. And what will you tell them? Vincent asked. Harold closed his eyes briefly, remembering the humiliation in the bank lobby, the stares, the silence, the sting of being treated as if he were less than human. I don't want revenge, he said. But I won't protect leadership that treats people like that. Vincent leaned forward. Then the bank's fate is sealed. Harold sighed. It was sealed the moment she judged me by my jacket instead of my record. Back at the bank, Clara's world was collapsing quickly. Investors refused her calls. Partners declined to meet. Even her own assistant avoided eye contact. Every door that had opened easily for her the day before was now slamming shut. By evening, she was pacing around her office, hands trembling, as the board gathered signatures for an emergency vote. She thinks she's teaching me a lesson, Clara muttered to herself. She thinks an old man can destroy my career. But deep down, she already knew the truth. It wasn't him. It was her. Her pride. Her arrogance. Her blindness. Her voice cracked. This can't be happening. At that exact moment, Lydia knocked softly and entered the office holding an envelope. It's time, Clara, she said. Clara stared at the envelope. Is this a joke? It's a motion for suspension pending investigation. Clara's pulse hammered in her ears. You're ousting me over a misunderstanding. Lydia's voice remained steady. You violated ethical conduct. You compromised a major acquisition. And you embarrassed this institution. Clara laughed bitterly. All because of an old man in a faded jacket. No, Lydia said, looking her in the eye. Because he turned out to be the man keeping this bank alive. Clara's breath caught. He's speaking to the media tomorrow, Lydia continued. If he confirms misconduct, the board will finalize your removal within 24 hours. Clara closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt genuinely afraid. By nightfall, the scandal had become national news. Screens in Times Square flashed Harold's name. News anchors replayed the footage. Commentators debated corporate prejudice. Community leaders demanded accountability. Customers began closing accounts in protest. Union Crest Bank was now the center of a cultural storm. Clara sat alone in her penthouse, watching the headlines, unable to escape them. She gripped her wine glass so tightly it nearly shattered. How did it come to this, she whispered. But she already knew. Morning light filtered into the grand hall of the Astoria Hotel, where the press conference would take place. Cameramen adjusted their equipment, reporters tested their microphones, and the entire room hummed with anticipation. This was the event the world had been waiting for overnight. Not for Union Crest Bank. Not for Clara Whitmore. But for Harold Jenkins, the elderly man the bank had humiliated, now revealed as the quiet billionaire philanthropist behind some of the largest private investments in the country. He entered slowly, leaning on his wooden cane, wearing the same faded jacket from the day before. This time, however, The world knew exactly who he was, and the room rose to its feet. Cameras clicked. Voices hushed. Every lens focused on him. Harold approached the podium, paused, then spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Thank you for coming." He rested both hands on the podium. "I've lived long enough to know that money does not measure a person's worth. Character does. Respect does." The room listened with absolute stillness. "Yesterday, when I walked into Union Crest, I wasn't seeking privilege. I wasn't asking for special treatment. I asked for what belonged to me, $50,000 of my own money." He exhaled. "But I was treated as if I were a criminal. As if my age, my clothes, or the color of my skin made me unworthy of dignity." Reporters lowered their eyes. Some shifted uncomfortably. Harold continued, voice steady but firm. "What shocked me was not that a CEO made a mistake. People make mistakes. What shocked me was the confidence with which she judged me. The pride. The dismissal. The certainty that her perception was the truth." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. "This belonged to my wife. She wrote something inside many years ago." He opened the book gently. "It costs you nothing to treat people with kindness. But it could cost you everything if you don't." Harold looked at the audience. Yesterday proved her right. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. He closed the notebook softly. "I have terminated my negotiations with Union Crest Bank. My firm will withdraw all pending agreements. Effective immediately, we are redirecting the $3 billion investment to institutions that uphold ethics, fairness, and humanity." The room erupted in questions, but Harold simply stepped back, signaling he wouldn't take any. As he turned to leave, the journalists surged forward, shouting, "Mr. Jenkins, do you blame Clara Whitmore personally? Do you think she should resign? Will there be legal action? Why were you dressed so modestly yesterday?" He paused for only one question. A young reporter called out softly, "Sir, what lesson do you hope the world learns from this?" Harold turned, his expression gentle but powerful. "That humility," he said, "is a form of wealth too many people forget to invest in." And then he walked away. While Harold delivered the most anticipated statement of the year, Clara Whitmore watched it from her office in the headquarters' top floor. The screen glowed brightly in the dim room. Her makeup was smeared from crying. Her suit jacket was lying discarded on the sofa. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she gripped the television remote. Every word Harold spoke felt like another stone placed on her chest. When he walked off the stage, Clara sank into her chair, numb. Moments later, her office door swung open, this time without a knock. It was Lydia, flanked by 3 board members and the head of human resources. Lydia's expression was unreadable. Calm. Professional. Final. "Clara," she said softly, "the board has voted." Clara swallowed hard. "Just tell me. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position as CEO of Union Crest Bank." The words seemed to echo around the office. Clara's voice cracked. "You're firing me. After everything I've built." "You didn't build anything alone," Lydia replied. "And yesterday, you nearly destroyed all of it." HR stepped forward. "You must return your access badges, corporate phone, and sign the termination documents." Clara stared at them in disbelief. "This is betrayal," she whispered. "No," Lydia said gently. "This is accountability." Clara broke. Her shoulders slumped. Tears streamed down her face silently, not from sadness alone, but from the painful realization that she had done this to herself. Her pride. Her assumptions. Her need to be superior. Her refusal to listen. This wasn't the bank's downfall. It was hers. She handed over her badge slowly. When HR left, she turned to Lydia. "Please," Clara whispered. "Tell me, is there any chance to fix this?" Lydia paused. "Only if you learn from it," she said. "Not for us, your chance here is gone. But for your life, yes. Reflection is still possible." Clara wiped her face with a trembling hand. "How did everything fall apart in 24 hours?" she whispered. "It didn't," Lydia replied. "It started falling apart the moment you stopped respecting people." By evening, Clara attempted one final act: damage control. She stood before a group of reporters outside the bank, hair undone, voice shaky, her usual confidence stripped away. "I want to apologize," she said quietly. "To Mr. Jenkins, and to everyone who watched that footage. My behavior was unacceptable. I let my position cloud my judgment. I failed to show the humanity every person deserves." For the first time in her public career, she looked genuinely vulnerable. The reporters listened, but the world had already decided. Her apology trended, but not for the reasons she hoped. It became a cautionary tale. That same evening, customers lined outside branches demanding account closures. Protesters gathered with signs reading, "Respect customers," and "Stop discrimination." Regulatory bodies launched a surprise audit. Share prices dropped. Investors withdrew interest. Union Crest Bank entered its darkest financial week in history. A headline captured it perfectly. "One moment of arrogance costs Union Crest $3 billion, and its CEO." As the world reacted, one person stayed away from the noise. Harold Jenkins sat quietly by his fireplace, his cane resting beside him. Vincent entered the room carrying a folder. Clara issued a public apology. Harold nodded without looking up. "And the bank?" Vincent asked. "Hurting," Harold murmured. "But maybe this wake-up call will save them in the long run." Vincent stuttered him. "You're not celebrating." Harold sighed. "Humiliation is a bitter thing. I wouldn't wish it on her, even if she wished it on me." Vincent sat down slowly. "Then why let the board fire her?" Harold looked into the fireplace, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "Some lessons," he said, "must cost something. Otherwise people never learn them." The storm that had engulfed Union Crest Bank began to settle slowly over the days that followed, but the damage remained visible from every corner of the financial world. Clara Whitmore's firing became the top headline on business channels. Analysts dissected her decisions. Ethics committee members used her case as a teaching example. HR executives across the country discussed the Whitmore incident as a reminder of what unchecked pride can cost an institution. But while the world moved on to the next scandal, two lives continued to unfold in quiet contrast. One rebuilding, the other healing. Clara sat alone in her apartment weeks after her termination. Her penthouse, once spotless and modern, had become a silent, hollow space. No assistants. No ringing phones. No urgent emails from investors. No driver waiting downstairs. Just a woman and her thoughts. The walls that once symbolized success now felt like a cage built from her own decisions. She spent hours staring out the window, watching ordinary people walk to work, shop, laugh, talk, people she had once believed she stood above. For the first time in years, she realized she didn't even know how to live outside of her title. A knock at the door startled her. It was Lydia. Clara froze. "Why are you here?" Lydia stepped inside quietly. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything." Clara swallowed hard. "I didn't just lose my job. I lost myself." Lydia nodded. "Then it's time to rebuild. But you can't start until you forgive yourself." Clara lowered her head. "I humiliated an innocent man. Yes, Lydia said plainly. And you paid for it. Now the question is, what will you do with the lesson? Clara exhaled shakily. I don't know. Start small, Lydia said. Serve. Volunteer. Listen. Do something that puts you where you never stood, not on a pedestal, but beside others. Clara looked up. Do you really think redemption is possible? Yes, Lydia answered. But redemption isn't granted. It's earned. While Clara wrestled with regret, Mr. Harold Jenkins lived a life of calm purpose. He moved through his days with the same gentle rhythm. Morning walks. Evening tea. Quiet philanthropy. Time in his garden. His billionaire status never changed his habits. Yet something had shifted in him too. The viral incident didn't make him bitter, it made him reflective. He knew humiliation could harden a person or humble them. For him, it did the latter. One afternoon, his business partner Vincent approached him with a document. The community center plans are done, Vincent said. They are ready to begin construction. Harold smiled softly. Good. That's money well spent. It will be named after you, Vincent added. Harold shook his head. No. Name it after my wife. She understood humanity better than I ever did. Vincent nodded with respect. And the scholarship fund? Harold asked. Fully endowed. Applications open next month. Harold closed the notebook he had been reading. Good. As he stood to pour himself tea, Vincent hesitated. Do you think Clara will ever recover from this? Vincent asked. Harold took a slow sip. If she seeks to restore her ego, no. If she seeks to restore her character, yes. Vincent exhaled. You're kinder than most. Harold looked at him with calm eyes. I'm too old to fight battles. But I'm never too old to teach lessons. 2 months later, fate placed the former CEO and the elderly man in the same room once again, though neither expected it. It was at a small community roundtable organized to discuss banking access for seniors, held in a modest civic center. Clara came alone, without a title, without a retinue. She wore simple clothes, nothing like the razor-sharp suits she once flaunted. She took a seat near the back, ready to listen, not speak. Harold arrived later, shaking hands warmly with attendees. When Clara saw him walk in, her breath caught. Her instinct was to leave. But she didn't. The meeting began. Ideas were discussed. Concerns were raised. Policies were challenged. Finally, the moderator asked, Does anyone else have a contribution to share? Clara lifted her hand hesitantly. The room turned. She stood slowly, her voice clear but fragile. I'm Clara Whitmore. I used to be the CEO of Union Crest Bank. A ripple of whispers filled the room. Clara swallowed hard. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because I failed, publicly and painfully. And I want to understand how to prevent what I did from happening in any banking hall again. Silence followed. Then Harold spoke. Ms. Whitmore. She looked at him, eyes filled with remorse. He continued, What happened between us, it hurt. But the fact that you are here, without cameras, shows something important. Clara blinked rapidly. I don't expect forgiveness. Harold nodded slowly. Forgiveness isn't something you demand. It's something you grow toward. She exhaled shakily. Harold added gently, then start growing. The room remained silent, but not cold. Something in the air shifted, like the first crack of light after a storm. Clara didn't reclaim her old position. She didn't return to the corporate throne. But she did reclaim something more meaningful. Humanity. She began working with financial inclusion organizations. She helped train bank staff on ethics and customer respect. She spent time listening to people she once ignored. She rebuilt herself, not as a CEO, but as a capable human being. Meanwhile, Harold continued his quiet philanthropy, his investments strengthening education, community centers, and opportunities for the underserved. Their paths crossed a few more times, not as rivals, not as enemies, but as individuals connected by a moment that changed both their lives. In the end, the scandal that shook a bank became a lesson that transcended money. Power can open doors, but humility keeps them open. Respect costs nothing, but withholding it can cost everything. And sometimes, the person you underestimate is the one holding your destiny in their hands.